If you enjoy this video, subscribe to Scarf and Goggles and check out our other content. By 1962, the jet age had come to land speed record breaking. Surplus engines sold off by the US military found their way into the workshops of drag racers and would-be speed kings. By 1962, 4 jet-powered land speed pioneers headed for the salt flats at Bonneville, taking aim at John Cobb's 15-year-old record. LA physician Dr. Nathan Ostich was the first, with the Scarlet Flying Caduceus. Craig Breedlove's Spirit of America showed potential on its debut, although neither car broke any records that year. Red tape had prevented Bill Frederick's Valkyrie mounting a challenge. Finally, a small team pushed a sleek silver projectile out onto the salt and prepared to set a new record. What followed was a tragedy that has been largely forgotten, overshadowed by the spectacular success enjoyed by jet cars in the years that followed. The driver's name was Glenn Leisha. The car was called Infinity. Harry Burge ran a couple of drag strips near San Francisco, at Fremont and Vacaville. As surplus military jet engines became available in the wake of the Korean War, Burge saw that running jet cars on his drag strips would be a big draw. He recruited Romeo Palamedes, a well-known local builder of drag racers, and Vic Elisha, a Berkeley engineering student, to help with the challenge of fitting a jet engine into a rolling chassis. The first product of this unlikely collaboration was Untouchable, an open cockpit racer built around a J-47 jet and first run in 1961. In a stroke, they had created the most powerful dragster ever seen, and despite initial resistance from purists, the huge crowds drawn to the spectacle of a howling jet car trailing flames as it smashed course records was too much for race promoters to resist. With ex-Korean War pilot Archie Liederbrand driving, Burge was able to charge huge appearance fees for his car. He was clearly onto something. Encouraged by the success and impressive performance of Untouchable, the team decided to build a new car to take aim at the world land speed record. Englishman John Cobb's record of 394 miles per hour had stood since 1947, and Burge was not the only one to spot the potential of the massive power available from a modern jet engine. With several potential rivals also developing their own jet cars to break the record, there was no time to lose. Like Romeo Palamedes, Glenn Leisha was a familiar fixture on the drag racing scene. He'd moved from his hometown of Wichita to California and had quickly made a name for himself on the drag strips of the West Coast. By 1962, at the age of just 26, he'd driven trucks, ridden motorcycles, and set records in dragsters. The wild, good-looking boy from Kansas was utterly fearless. Untouchable's original driver, Archie Liederbrand, had recently fallen out with Palamedes, and so in early 1962, Burge, Palamedes and Elisha found themselves in partnership with Leisha as they planned their land speed challenger. Ex-Caltech student Tom Fukuya was brought in to help build the car. With the new car's design owing much to Untouchable, the team sourced a new J-47 engine with afterburner from a surplus F-86 Sabre and built their challenger in a hangar at Oakland Airport. The J-47 was encased in an aluminium tube with 4 wheels fared into the sides. An enclosed cockpit sat squarely in the jet intake. It was a gloriously, empirically simple, no-frills design. The polished bodywork remained unpainted to save money, except for a simple nameplate that carried the car's name in blood red: Infinity. The team had finished building their car by the summer, and they naturally took it to the drag strip to test it. Satisfied with reaching 236 miles per hour in a quarter of a mile, they hooked up the trailer and headed straight to Bonneville. On the team's first visit to Bonneville, Leisha took Infinity to a peak speed of 360 miles per hour. John Cobb's 394 miles per hour record set 15 years earlier was in sight, and the team hadn't yet lit the jet's afterburner. The car felt good and spirits were high, but there was still work to do. The wheels needed balancing, the parachute system needed work, but as they headed back to Oakland, secretly Burge and Elisha were not at all sure they had the right man in the driving seat. Glenn Leisha was an out-and-out drag racer whose all-or-nothing attitude suited the drag strip perfectly. But the extremes associated with the land speed record needed a more cautious, test pilot approach. Small speed increments, an understanding of the car's power and how it was delivered, and patience in approaching the target speed were key. While Bonneville offered a 5-mile run-up to the measured mile, Leisha's preferred method was to start his run 5/8 of a mile before the timing beams, holding Infinity on the brakes as he wound the engine up, before accelerating as hard as possible. When Vic and Harry had quietly suggested he should take it easy during the test runs, Glenn had routinely done the opposite, and the result was that astonishing peak speed of 360 miles per hour after just 2 days on the salt. Elisha and Burge considered replacing their driver, but ultimately Glenn Leisha, whose runs in Untouchable had helped fund Infinity's construction, had put too much time and effort into the project to be cast aside. Hoping they could tame their hot-headed driver, the team made final preparations and returned to Bonneville on September the 6th. After a couple of days' preparation, Leisha put in 3 test runs on the 8th, peaking at 330 miles per hour. But he couldn't understand why the timekeepers kept reporting a calculated speed well short of his peak. He knew he'd gone quicker than that. What was going on? As the team discussed the tests one evening, they were gripped with a sudden realization. Could it be that Leisha didn't fully understand the rules of the world land speed record? Didn't he realize the timekeepers weren't measuring his speed as he entered the timing zone? They were averaging his speed over a mile, starting with the first marker. Hadn't anyone explained this wasn't a drag strip? This was Bonneville. Early the next day, Glenn immediately took the car to 283 miles per hour, fired by his new understanding of the rules, and again ignoring Elisha's instructions. By 9 a.m. they were ready for the next run, aiming just below 350 miles per hour. This would be another test run with no afterburner. Leisha whistled happily as he climbed into the cockpit in the centre of the jet intake. He knew what he had to do. The engine was spun up, and as the jet screamed into life, Vic Elisha and Tom Fukuya headed off to meet Infinity when it arrived at the other end of the course. As their truck neared the measured mile, Leisha and Infinity blasted past them, trailing flames. This time, the afterburner had been lit. In true drag racer style, Leisha was going for the record. All or nothing. At an estimated 400 miles per hour, the car began to drift to the right, away from the black line that marked the course. If the braking chute had been released at that point, the car might have straightened up by itself. In the truck, Vic and Tom saw no chute. Perhaps a tyre blew, or a wheel was torn off, as Leisha fought to correct the car. Parts flew off Infinity in a cloud of destruction as it tumbled. Finally, the car smashed into the ground nose first. Infinity's driver never stood a chance. Elisha and Fukuya were first on the scene. The remains of the cockpit lay far from the battered power plant, and there, still strapped into his seat, was what remained of Glenn Leisha. Behind him, Bonneville's brilliant white salt was streaked with oil, metal, blood, and bone. In the days that followed, sensational press coverage went as far as suggesting Leisha had been sucked into the engine during the most violent crash ever witnessed. In the end, the official death certificate was more circumspect. Leisha had suffered a skull fracture when his jet car had exploded. A line of volunteers walked the course, picking up every piece of wreckage they could see. The team were assured that Infinity's remains would be properly disposed of, only to discover years later that the wreck of the Great Silver Car had lain at the side of the main highway at Bonneville for a further 2 years, providing a stark reminder to visitors that speed records are a dangerous pursuit. 8 months before the events at Bonneville, Infinity's brave driver had married his 19-year-old sweetheart. Shortly before he died, Leisha had learned that he would soon become a father. Glenn Leisha was laid to rest in Wichita, Kansas. Although well known in drag racing circles, the wider world had barely heard of Glenn Leisha before the events of September 10, 1962. Sadly, both Leisha and the car he bravely piloted were destined to become a tragic footnote in the history of the land speed record. All or nothing. It's a brave bet. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to check out Scarf and Goggles' channel for more tales of record breaking. Until next time,